John Dover Wilson, the editor of Cambridge's New Shakespeare edition of Richard II, amassed considerable amount of evidence that it was based on a source play. In the foreword, he wrote to fellow scholars about the question they had to face. Was Shakespeare a profound historical scholar, or merely the reviser of such a scholar's play? Dover Wilson concluded it was the latter. And while he never guessed who actually had written that source play, we can now prove it was Thomas North. The passages on grief in Richard II derive from similar discussions in Thomas North's Nepo's Lives, 1602. As shown here, the borrowing is indisputable. Both describe griefs of the inward soul as being the result of a loss of perspective, as if seeing things through water and a corrupt or false eye. In the conclusion, the play even quotes the conclusion of North's passage, with the queen referring to Hope as a keeper back of death who gently would dissolve the bands of life. In fact, all passages on grief in Richard II come from these same pages of North's Nepos, and there is zero doubt that this was the passage used. A search for dissolve the bands of within 20 words of life and death on the more than 100 trillion web pages on Google or 40 million books on Google Books show no results except for works quoting Richard II or North's Nepo's Lives. The same is true for a search of early English books online, and while every play in the Shakespeare canon includes similar borrowings from North, this one is significant because North would not publish Nepo's Lives until 1602, which is 5 years after the publication of Richard II. In other words, the original author of Richard II had to have access to North's personal handwritten translation of this passage before he published it. In another scene, when the gardener and servant compare commonwealths to gardens and unruly children to fruit trees, the playwright managed to recall two different passages of North from two different texts. It was in Plutarch where North first described Egypt as a land filled with both good and bad, as fertile soil brings forth both wholesome herbs and noisome weeds. And in the Dial, North describes unruly children with vices as fruit trees that need pruning. Superfluous branches must be lopped away before their fruits can be enjoyed. Elsewhere in North's style, we even find "Oh, what pity is it?" which also appears in this same scene. Dover Wilson and other Shakespeare scholars have never guessed at the identity of the original author of Shakespeare's source play. But is it reasonable to believe that Shakespeare was adapting someone else's play and filling it with North's passages, including passages he had yet to publish? No. We have other proof confirming North's authorship. In 1591, North purchased a used 1582 edition of his own Dial of Princes. That's his signature right there. And then used it as a notebook for plays that he wrote or revised in the 1590s, including Richard II. Consider, for example, this page here. North has added a few corrections, like his change in spelling for ignominy, but he has also underlined two descriptions that he finds important for some reason. One involves two buckets in a well. If the bucket that is empty above doth not go down, the other which is full beneath cannot come up. This comes from a letter by Marcus Aurelius, who has just conquered the Parthians, but the emperor feels bad for those he has vanquished. He notes ruefully how the rise of one king requires the downfall of another, just like two buckets in a well. The image is significant. The one bucket is empty, hanging in the air. The other is full, and had to go down for the other to come up. The other sentence that North had underlined related another image to describe one king vanquishing another, the conquering sun of a bright sunshine day, which is preceded by a rain of mist or frost that melts away. These are the two images that North had underscored, and he reused them again in a similar context in Richard II, when one king, Henry IV, had risen and brought about the downfall of the weak and self-pitying Richard II.
Now is this golden crown like a deep well, but those two buckets filling one another, the emptier ever dancing in the air, the other down unseen and full of water. That bucket down, and full of tears am I, drinking my griefs whilst you mount up on high.
God save King Harry,
And send him many years of sunshine days. Alack the heavy day, that I have worn so many winters out, and know not now what name to call myself. Oh, that I were a mockery king of snow, standing before the sun of Bolingbroke to melt myself away in water drops.
Early English Books Online confirms other English writers also referred to fortune's buckets, but none before North used this specific language, and none before or since combined it with the image of a bright sunshine day, melting frost or snow. These metaphors were not only taken from North's style, they were specifically underlined by North himself, and as will be shown in later posts, he also underscored many other passages he used in the plays that Shakespeare later adapted. In 2018, we made the front page of the New York Times and news reports around the world for the discovery of an important Shakespearean source manuscript kept at Thomas North's family library. But finding North's actual workbook that he used when writing the plays is far more significant, and it was just introduced in this video.